Yeah, hello and welcome to our second Azure AMA, and I'm really pleasure and really happy to welcome again Marcel and Patrick to our AVD Best Practice AMA session. And yeah, we have many feedback from the community to hold this session again in English. And yeah, here we are. And yeah, thank you, Marcel and Patrick, that you are joining me again and us, our guests. So feel free to share your questions, to share your ideas, so that we can discuss all questions related to AVD. But before we start, please introduce yourself. So Patrick, we will start with you.
Yeah, would be happy to do so. Thank you for the invitation, Gregor. Hi, everybody that is joining us in the stream today. My name is Patrick Köhler. Most of you might know me using my Twitter handle, WVD Logics or AVD Logics, quite active in the community. And I'm also a Microsoft MVP in the enterprise mobility space, as well as a VMware vExpert. Also, when it comes to VDI technologies in the cloud, which is actually working all together, let's say it like this, AVD, Horizon Cloud on Azure, for those that know it. Yeah, maybe we'll have some touch points on that today as well. That's, yeah, a short introduction on myself.
Perfect. And yeah, thank you again that you are here. So Marcel, please introduce yourself.
Yeah, thanks a lot for having me. Yeah, my name is Marcel. I'm also working like you, Gregor, in the Azure or you, Patrick, in the AVD community for a while. Yeah, maybe you know me or some tools I built in the past, like the WVD admin tool. I think that is one of my famous tool I built on right now, I guess 2 years ago, or I started with this 2 years ago. Yeah, thanks.
Sounds good.
I have
Yeah, a
There it
little bit
was.
too late, but yeah, we will go to this service also. And yeah, I see some comment. Good morning, Lucas. I see your comment in the chat, so please feel free to use the chat and raise your questions. But before we start, we will. I have some questions from the community and from our forms that I have introduced in our Azure Bonn meetup. And so we will start with the first question again. What is the most exciting tool that you are seeing in the AVD space in the last 6 months? So Patrick, we start with you. What was your favorite topic with its coming to life in the last 6 months?
Yeah, that's a very exciting question, Gregor. And actually, I have to split it up into two features that I actually prefer when we're talking about AVD, especially. And what I really like is the security focused approach, or when it comes to drill down security, or everything when it comes to the protection of data, especially when working with AVD. And one of my favorite features is screen capture protection. So the possibility to prevent people from making screenshots when working in an AVD session. And the second feature that I really appreciate, which is currently in public preview, is the Autoscale feature. So dynamically scaling session hosts. This is really, or how can I say, those two features are really what makes AVD efficient and secure, for example. And that's what I most appreciate and enjoy since it has been released for Autoscale primarily in public preview now.
Yeah, can really absolutely agree to this two great features. But I know from the Autoscale feature there, I know a community call tool that can this be a little bit longer. So Marcel, introduce your favorite
Features?
features.
Yeah, so that's a good question. So my two favorite features or the first one, that is Power on Connect. That is what I really like, even for VDI, but also for multi-session host, to start a session host if no session host is running or not enough running, if the user clicks on the client on a desktop or an application. That is one really cool feature because it allows you to run without a session host over the weekend or at night, but the user can then start with the desktop or with the application a session host. That is what I really like and use. And the second, I'm not sure is it a feature. Yeah, it is a feature. That is a few weeks ago, Microsoft introduced an API to change the user setting on a personal assigned VDI. And that was so long missing. So that is the reason why I listed here. I expected it a little bit earlier, maybe a year or two, but I'm really happy that it's now there, and I don't have to uninstall the agent on a session host and reinstall the agent to remove or unassign a user and then assign a user again. So that is what I like, because you can do it now on the fly with an API call or from the Azure portal.
Oh yeah, I can also really agree. And the session and Power on Connect is one of the features that I mostly used in an SMB environment. So it's really helpful for scaling or for to start only the VM when it's needed, and you can also shut down and save some money when you not need the AVD environment. It's really good. So we get a question from Saga, because get the recording in slide deck, so we don't use the slide deck, so it's your session, and feel free to ask your sessions, but the recording is directly available on LinkedIn and YouTube after the session, so you can every time join and see it again. So there's a big question from, I hope it's coming. Yeah, good morning. When remote app will support OneDrive Sync client, in my production environment, there are many business-critical applications which require export and import functionality, and user mostly save data in OneDrive, and they want to update data. Oh. When remote app will support OneDrive Sync client.
Okay, I understand. So basically, when you're using it as a remote application, so as an application directly from within the remote desktop client. Yeah, that's a good question. I think, or at least from my information, there's nothing publicly out yet when it will be officially supported. It's kind of difficult as well. As you might know, you will need to have the Windows Explorer, because from the Windows Explorer, you are interacting somehow with the OneDrive client then, or with the OneDrive service to access the applications. A potential thing that you could do, but that would just be an idea. That's something I did as well in a lab environment, is to use the auto sign-in functionality in OneDrive. You publish the Windows Explorer and just rename it to probably OneDrive. And by signing in, accessing the application, you have an auto sign into OneDrive. That could be a possibility to solve the issue, but that's something to be tested and validated in a production environment. And this is not an official procedure to go to. But it would be a working workaround.
Sounds good. Yeah, and I also don't know any supported way for this for this feature or for this request. But maybe it's coming some news in the latest in the next couple of months. Yeah. Andrew is asking that we have 3 top tips for AVD, so basic, medium, and expert level. This is really a great question. So Marcel.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I understand it correctly, or if my first answer, one of my tips, fits into this question. But let me give it. So what I'm doing often in AVD projects is the switching of the disk types. As you know, you have to pay for a disk in Azure Virtual Desktop 24/7, 30 days a month, independent if the virtual machine is running or not. And Microsoft recommend to use premium disk. And the premium disk costs around €20 for 120 for a Windows disk, 128 gigabyte. And that sums up, if you have 1,000 virtual machine, or let me say 100 virtual machine, that are €2,000 only for the disk, without doing anything on the virtual machine. So what I do is, and that is why I'm using my second tool called Hydra, to switch the disk. Before starting a virtual machine, I switch it to premium, and then the virtual machine runs with this premium disk. And if the virtual machine is later deallocated while it's no longer used, I switch the disk back from premium to HDD, which only costs around $5 or euro for the disk instead of 20. I've written a blog post about this. Check this out. I made some calculation based on a customer environment how much money you can save with this feature. That is pretty cool to bring the cost a little bit more down and to win a cost calculation compared to an existing environment in a data center.
Sounds really great. And I know some or many customers are using this tool to save some of the money. So yeah, Patrick, what are your favorite best practices or tips for AVD?
Yeah, that's a very, very good question when I recap, Andrew. And a tip that I can give you is actually what Marcel already introduced or Gregor already said.
Right.
The importance is how familiar are you with Azure? If you have the feeling that you might have already good knowledge on Azure, you understand more than the fundamentals or even advanced knowledge, you can dig deeper into the AVD specific features. But if you say that you have to maintain a large environment, I always recommend to take some support with tools like the one that Marcel has built, the WVD admin, because it helps you to mitigate many issues, to do many things right from the start by just using the tool. Marcel created this tool with a lot of effort, helping you to succeed quite easily with all the bits and pieces with AVD, so to build the host pool basically in the correct manner. So this is always what I recommend my customers to when they say they want to go AVD native. But if you feel that you are a little bit more into AVD or the Azure infrastructure as well, it is important to understand networking. This is super important. Security is another thing, and maybe also patch management. By saying this, I mean most likely how to integrate or how to probably manage your AVD session hosts after you deployed them, because deploying AVD is not a problem. Maintaining it is a bit more the challenge. That means, do you use Microsoft Endpoint Manager, aka Intune in this case, to manage to do the maintenance or lifecycle management? Do you probably use FSLogix? Then it's also important to know this underlying storage and what kind of storage type you need. Is Azure Files sufficient? Do you need to go to Azure NetApp Files, for example, and which SKU to choose? That's also cost factor then. And networking, how performant do you need to have it, or to which infrastructure resources on premises are you connecting to? That means there's also something that you need to consider. We're not talking only about provisioned desktops. It's also important to talk about which resources are you trying to access? Are they located on premises? Is there an express route in between? Are you using site-to-site VPN, or are you using Azure native? So Azure networking is really essential to make not only the VDI environment work, also to ensure that connectivity is really working for infrastructure components.
Yeah, it's really also a good explanation, because there are so many different services that you need for AVD, and this also needs some planning and so on. And so, yeah, this is also great explanation, because also of the AVD VPN connection, but also the whole security stack that is also be possible for AVD. And I have some more questions. And I see that, one moment. Yeah, Andre has not just known about the blog post, so I have shared the link here. You can see, and I hope you see this in the chat. This is directly the link to the explanation from Marcel. And we will also take some additional hints for the AVD environment in the chat when we have some of this question. So there are some interesting questions from Ganesh. When AVD host tool will be available in Central India location? And from my point of view, I don't have any hint about this and when it will be coming, but I think it will. So Microsoft is rolling out the feature in all regions. So I think it will be coming in the next couple of months, but I don't have a date yet. But
maybe a good resource to share, Gregor, is the WVD or AVD roadmap. So when you go to aka.ms/WVD roadmap, you will directly get access to all the roadmap items that Microsoft has foreseen or have foreseen in the future. And there you can also see which kind of data centers will be coming next or ensure next availability for AVD services. So that's the link to check out in this case.
Yeah, and great. I also post this in the chat, and it's really easy. Thanks, Patrick.
You're welcome.
Here comes again a question. Okay. Yeah, was also more a note about the helpful blog post for Marcel.
Thanks.
So when you did you handle AVD rollout in different regions, and how did you handle this in in enterprise environments to scale and handle AVD environments in different regions? Was your best tips and best practices, Patrick?
Oh, that's a very good question. And I like this because you have to do a little bit of pre-work before we really jump into AVD, because the number one question is, how much resources do you need in your region? And then the first question is, depending on how many virtual machines you need, to increase the quota. So the first thing that I always recommend is drawing a picture what you really want to achieve, especially when we're talking about cross-region AVD deployments, and increase the quota by opening a Microsoft support ticket. Microsoft is usually quite fast doing this, but it will help you throughout the project to create enough resources. That's the number one tip. Number two is always, how do you interconnect resources? How do you split them? Which kind of methodology are you following? And like this, I always like to say, I know it sounds a little bit marketing-like, but it's following the cloud adoption framework, because it helps you really with guidance and governance to really build an infrastructure-ready environment for enterprises, for large enterprises. And when we're talking about multi-regions, it's important to have that governance, first of all, in place. Secondly, to build a schema or a scheme that helps you to have rebuildable blocks for your AVD environment as well, that have the governance, because that's something that will save your life throughout the project. And later on, finally, to establish the connectivity that you have when you establish a landing zone for your connectivity resources and interconnect them between the different regions that you have. That would be my advice. So it's first of all very related to resources that you have, that you know what you want to deploy. Then you know your regions and you know the capabilities of that region. And lastly, to make yourself familiar in building out those landing zones or those blocks for your governance and further, how can I say, the scale later on of your deployments. If we're talking about an enterprise scale, or if you start small and expand, that really depends on where you are in your process and what is the aim finally of the region.
I really like the explanation because of the governance. So I see so many, and I must have a little bit to also, because I see so many environments, and it's all fine when you're starting, when you're trying out, and when you get a feeling of the service. But when you start, it's really in production. So please take a look at the governance overall for the cloud environment. It's really helpful and makes your life a little bit easier. So Marcel, what is your mention in this area?
Yeah, that is that's sometimes used even if you are normally work or can work in a single region, but there are reasons to have a second region attached. And what I normally use to connect regions is VNet peering. So that is a pretty easy approach if your network design fits, so that you can add another region and have enough IP addresses you can use and not have all use in the first location. Then it's pretty easy to do. And so you can have a second host pool with a second set of session hosts to provide resources. And I mentioned that because what I sometimes see is that Azure is running out of special kind of virtual machines. We had this, I think nearly everybody in West Europe know that sometimes you are not able to roll out new session hosts with a specific virtual machine type, or even start existing session hosts with a specific virtual machine types, because they are in use from other customers have started the virtual machine a little bit earlier than you, and so you are not able. And if you are going for an autoscale approach in Azure Virtual Desktop, you have a big problem, because if autoscale cannot start a virtual machine while the resources are not there, then you get into trouble and the user cannot connect and the user cannot work. And that is the reason why I sometimes use a second region. For example, in close to West Europe is North Europe, and we often have the virtual machine sizes available in North Europe, which are not available in West Europe. This is also a good point, because I had this often, and having a second region is not anytime a good idea, because the latency sums up. Because you go from North Europe to West Europe to your data center, and then it could be too high in case of the latency. And what I did, for example, in one of my tools is to handle this. I built, because I was forced, I had no other option. I built in a function so that Autoscale will start a virtual machine or will auto deploy a new virtual machine, and the virtual machine size is not available. It will switch to an alternative type. You have to set it first, and you have to make sure that it works in your environment. And that is what I often use. If I cannot start this virtual machine D4AS v4, then it switch automatically to an L version for a time and will start the virtual machine. That is not maybe the best practice, because you will have another virtual machine size you have not which is not your first choice, but it's better than not running any session hold and user cannot connect. Sorry, it was a little bit longer.
No, but actually, I have a very important point that we should still mention, because we talked a lot about the Azure infrastructure, but what about the user's greatest asset, the user profile? And that's maybe something to add as well, because it's not less important. Just came to my mind as well. That's also when talking about how do you, or what kind of user profile solution do you have? For example, if you're using FS Logics, you should consider to make it available in the second region as well, not only for your failover then. That's also one point. It's also a strategy on how to synchronize the user data throughout all the regions. And that's possible by using a feature called Cloud Cache. And the Cloud Cache functionality enables you to use multiple kind of storage accounts or storage resources, let's say it like this, and to synchronize basically the data to all the required regions. And that gives you also a high availability on the storage that is consumed here in this case. And ensures that your user profile data is where you need it actually.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, and I think this is really a good explanation about how you can get your AVD environment in a high availability state, and this is also really important from the Azure infrastructure solution, but also, and you are really right, Patrick, the user profile also be really needed for a good experience. And yeah, thanks for this explanation, really great. And there are coming some questions in the chat. And the first was also from James. James, he asked, when getting started with AVD, what pitfalls should we look out for? And I think this is also be a good question. So Marcel, we will start with you.
Yeah, I read James' mail before I answered the last question. That is one of my there's one pitfall you can fall in, not having the correct virtual machine size available in Azure, because I heard this yesterday. Sometimes the cloud is endless. It's not endless.
Who is saying this?
I guess that is from you. That is one point, and using the correct virtual machine size, even in multi-user environment, is important. And please take a look to the disk and to the storage account. If you are using FS Logics, for example, use the correct storage account to avoid that you have a high cost at the end of the month because you have used the wrong cold tier, for example. That's the worst tiers you can use for profiles.
Absolutely, and to got also this point. So why we going to this to the availability discussion? Because as of now, in Germany West Central, so in Frankfurt, there are some limited available for the D2 and E2 VMs, and this is the reason to take a look for additional SKU sizes, or maybe for a second region. To get also the best experience for your AVD environment. So the Simon is asked a good questions to FS Logics, and I think this is also be a good question for Patrick.
Of course, happy to take it. I mean, it's a very important question. What do you do with the profiles when a user just left the company? First of all, you need to take care, or depending on the company or your regulation, you need to ensure that the data is kept for X many years. I think usually that's 10 years. So it would make sense to export probably the user profile for that amount of time. I don't know how this is being handled, maybe, but I'm not in, how can I say in Germany, DSGVO specialist in this case, but
GDPR.
GDPR, excuse me. Yeah, missing that word. Yeah, but correct. Yeah, but in general, there's no problem. If the user profile is really not needed anymore, you can delete it as well. But you need to ensure that in the right governance, in case that a GDPR fits or needs to fit, you need to keep it. And maybe you should move the FSLogix profile, and that's maybe the importance or the question more. Move it to a storage location which is cheap. Let's say it like this. Don't store it on your ANF storage where it consumes probably 20, 40 gigs of space. Move it to a plub storage or somewhere where code data can be stored for the time being, so that you have it somewhere where you have it on a cheap storage located, and not necessarily where it consumes the highest cost. That would be my recommendation, instead of deleting it, except that fits with your company policy and it can be removed. So moving it to a cheaper storage location.
Great, and I can really agree to this. So move this to a cheaper storage SKU. It's really helpful for your profile management and for your costs also.
And you can automate it, no, Gregor?
So?
You can automate it. You can run a script, maybe each week, to check if the file stamp is older, maybe than 3 months. And in the second step, you can verify, because the profile folder contains the SID of the user. You can then cross-check if the user is deactivated in the Azure AD or in AD, or deleted or no longer existing in AD, and then can move it to another storage or delete it if you don't need to store it.
Sounds great.
That's a good point. But let me join on that one as well, because there's another tip that now that we're talking so much about FSLogix, which is also not less, because when we're doing something in the cloud, we need to make sure that it is highly available. We need to make sure that it's fast in its accessibility, but then we have to also maintain what we have. And as most of you know, when you're playing around with AVD, you set up your first host, pull your first session host, Teams is installed, and you didn't do any optimization, and you have FSLogix, and bam, user profile is grown to 40 gigs, and that's the first sign-in of the user. What do? You have 2 options to go for. First option is you recreate the user profile by adding the exclusions first to FSLogix. That means that you have a group policy to put in place with an XML file for the exclusions. Option number 1. Option number 2 is what happens if the auto-grow happens during the working with the user profile. That means your user is already active for 2 weeks, has productive data on it. You cannot just say, okay, we delete your data and recreate the profile. So what do? And the number 1 tip that I could give you is to use the script by Jim Moyle, basically. Jim Moyle has created a very exciting script that helps you to shrink your profile disks again. And that helps you, and this is a very good tip that I can just give you, do this regularly. Do this probably as a scheduled task. Keep the maintenance as well for your FSLogix profile. This will shrink and keep the profile size as small as possible. The user will not automatically reach any kind of limits, even though you can now expand via group policy as well the size of your FSLogix profiles. But secondly, it's also about cost, that you keep your costs safe, because you have to imagine if that happens for 1 user, that might be feasible. For 10, depending on your infrastructure, still. But imagine you have to do this for 2,000 or 10,000 of users. Each gigabyte that you deploy more costs real money, and you have to maintain that. So keeping the costs for the user profiles, and especially by shrinking them small, really helps throughout the project and gives you the possibility to save money for upgrading the virtual machine types or giving you other advantages when working on AVD.
Thanks. Also a good explanation. I have searched for the link and have placed this also in the chat. So feel free. And I think this is also really helpful for your profile management, especially in the FSLogix world. So there are some question around Intune, and not sure about this, because when AVD will support user-based Intune policy, I'm not have a status about this. So Marcel, Patrick, did you have a status about this?
Actually, I can always recommend here to check out the roadmap, because Microsoft
Okay.
will officially announce every feature that is coming next. And maybe it might make sense, additionally to the AVD roadmap, to check also the roadmap for MEM, or Microsoft Endpoint Manager, because that will include the Intune as well as the SCCM or Config Manager, let's say like this, roadmap as well. Keep an eye on that, because that's the source where Microsoft will announce it first.
Great, thanks. And I have also shared this link. And yeah, I have a question from our forums. And this is also really a little bit funny question. So, because did you have any, did you see any advantage of using Windows 11 in a AVD environment in comparing to Windows 10? So, Marcel.
Wow, that is a good question. You could ask the same question, makes it sense to use Windows 11 on a notebook instead of Windows 10? Technically, I'm not sure. Maybe, yeah, okay, maybe there are some new features in Windows 11 and that you then have in AVD as well. And it makes absolute sense if you're running, or if the users are running Windows 11 on their notebooks or their end device, to have the same operating system in AVD, so that the user feel at home and not have to have on the local device maybe the start icon left and on AVD in the middle. I would do it in the same way, but I'm not sure if there are big reasons to use Windows 11 or 10. I personally go for Windows 11 if the user or if the company are still rolling out Windows 11 for their end device.
Yeah, absolutely good. Patrick?
Yeah, that's really a good question. And for me, the question is not about the advantage going from Windows 10 to Windows 11. The question is more about user adoption. Are your users ready to handle Windows 11? Imagine you're working in an office or with people that are used to Windows 10 for the past years, that are probably telling you they are close to their retirement, they don't want to adapt basically somehow. Do you really want to give them a platform which is completely new and really cloud adopted? This is always, how can I say, where you need to find a balance as a company as well. What do you try to achieve? When people are used to Windows 10 and the workflows of Windows 10, it might make sense to stay. Windows 11 has a great new user interface. That's on one hand, I cannot discuss this away, but you have to think of the users that are actually using the operating system. Windows 11 is an operating system in general that's built for the cloud, and it will adopt with the features that will be presented by Microsoft in the future, with all the advantages that we can see, for example, now already for Windows Server 2022. I think the features like hot patching or something like this will come to Windows 11 at the time soon. So from the administrative side, it will have the advantage. In a VDI, or when we're talking about desktop as a service or whatever we're trying to deploy, we need to think and see the user-centric workspace and if the user is able to handle this. Even with putting the Windows icon in the center of the screen, that might help for navigation, but still, you might think of the users that might get confused very quickly. That might not be the best option to go for. So my recommendation, pilot it. So run a pilot in your company, see if it fits, if users can make that adoption easily. If you see that there are too many disadvantages because you have to do a lot of explaining, I would move this a bit in your roadmap, as long as it's not necessary to go for it.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, got the point also. And from the so we discuss whole thing of the technical things, and but the user adoption is really also really important to get also a good experience. And I see so many companies, they don't have a good plan to also adopt the user in the AVD and space. And yeah, this also be a really good point to improve this scenario, to improve this on the company level. Yeah, so we have an additional question from Kaiten. And he asked how to regularly update team machine void installer on AVD. And I think this is really also a good question. So because there we can be also going to how did you handle the security updates, the regular security updates. So Marcel, I will start with you. So first, two questions. Firstly, how did you handle the security updates on AVD? And how did you handle the monthly updates or more updates coming for the team's machine-wide installer?
Yeah, I didn't read the security updates in this message.
Or it's not. It's more a question from my side.
Okay, then let me start with the security updates. So yes, like written, if you had a custom image approach and multi-user session host, I often do this in an image, the security updates, or what I doing more and more is updating the virtual machine within schedule, maybe each Sunday morning, and run all the Windows updates are provided by Microsoft to patch the virtual machine. That works for session hosts, for multi-session hosts, and VDI as well. And if you are working, or if you are talking about the Teams update and Microsoft Endpoint Manager, yeah, then I go the classic way. I will build a new package and deploy the update to the session host. And yes, I have to work with the challenge that I have to make sure that the virtual machines are running if I normally autoscale them, so that I maybe find a time frame, a maintenance windows where I can do this, or where I can schedule the updates so that they are applied, independent of the user logged on or not.
Patrick, and I know this is also be a good question. So because normally when you have a host PC, you get the monthly updates directly for the Office environment, for the Teams installer. So you see sometimes the Teams coming up with a new version. You have some new buttons and so on. But in the AVD environment, it's really a little bit complicated. But yeah, Patrick, what is your recommendations in this space?
That's a very, very good question. And this is really something that we will see more often in the future. Definitely, because we all know that Microsoft is regularly updating Teams. The same actually also for the OneDrive client. And when you're not having a custom image, this is always quite challenging, because you always have to ensure that the first time running the update is a successful one. Of course, what we already mentioned, Microsoft Endpoint Manager, aka Intune, is always a good route to do the regular monthly updates. But it is, at the time being, I have to admit, quite a huge effort you still have to do when you want to do this with the Teams update as well. It's simply because you want to keep the governance on one side. That means you have to redo the packages every time. This is quite challenging at the time being, especially if you're using the Teams machine-wide installer as well. This is something to mention. I can understand, but this is actually the supported way to go to, even though it means that you still have a higher effort, let's say it like this. But something which would be really great is if you would mention this, for example, in the feature requests, because I think that is something Microsoft should really take it maybe a bit more into consideration as well. That's maybe a positive feedback, because it would help a lot of companies to adapt, and also maybe help Microsoft adapt the way it needs to be updated for VDI environments, as it will impact a huge community of people that are using remote desktops nowadays.
Great. And yeah, I can really also a good point to raise feedback or to give feedback to also to the Microsoft Product group is really helpful, and they really develop and get the feedback and take a look how they can handle this and implement this in the AVD solutions. Yeah, so we have another good questions from Ganesh, and he is asking, is there many best practice for optimization like OS optimization for session host? Marcel?
Yeah, that is a good point. Yeah, there is an script that is provided from, or they are called in the past the VDI guys. That is what is the name? The Azure Virtual Desktop Optimization Pack. You can find it on GitHub. That is pretty good, because it's does the most common optimizations for Windows or for Azure Virtual Desktop, but make sure that you customize it. If you run it as it is, it will remove some universal apps like the calculator. And that is what sometimes people are then missing. So please modify it so that it fits your needs, and not all the universal apps are removed. You may be, which are expected by the user. And I think the important part is when to run this optimization pack. And that it is recommended to run this optimization pack after the deployment, like written in the question, because then it can deactivate the unnecessary services and remove the application which are maybe installed by the rollout process. And that is not easy to do natively. And what I do, if I use WVD admin, for example, you can trigger the optimization pack if you have installed it in a custom image. So that is the way I go to run the script, the customized script, after each new session host rollout. And I also built this in my other tool, Hydra, where you can select from a drop-down list a script, like the desktop optimization pack, which is pre-configured to not remove the calculator and to not do a lot of stuff on the disk, because it should not take so long. So you can select it and roll out a virtual machine, and then the optimization pack is triggered directly after the installation. That is the two ways I use to make sure that each session host is optimized after a fresh rollout.
Great. Thanks, Marcel. And we're going to the next question, and it is coming from our forms environment. And there's also a good question, and I will give it to you, Patrick. So how important is image management and the use of the Azure Image Builder?
Yeah, that's a question that is basically, for my experience, self-explaining on one hand, because image management is key for an efficient use of AVD.
Absolutely, yeah.
That fits perfectly in the part that we had before with the image optimization, because without efficiently optimizing your virtual desktop images, you cannot efficiently run your environment. And the question is here, how do you treat your images? Images are, for me, some kind of a reflection of use cases. And when we reflect use cases, we need to maintain them, not only with Windows updates or patches of applications, also on the efficiency on how we consume Windows services in the cloud. This is even becoming more critical. With Azure Image Builder, Microsoft gives you, of course, an opportunity to build your images in a quite automatic way. There are other possibilities as well, going with Terraform or any kind of infrastructure as code possibility that you have. But I use or recommend always tools to go that help you in the image building process. And yeah, one of those tools actually is one that Marcel has created. Again, it's a WVD admin, because it's not because I want to make advertisement, because it's really a tool that I use and recommend my customers. Because if you want to start with Azure Image Builder, for example, you have to consider a lot of things. You have also to consider that you have to adopt your knowledge as well to that kind of new technologies, of the modern way of building it. And it's a quite logical way, how I used to say, way of building the images, because it's nothing that you graphically can consume. So there's really no image builder that says, I track this software into that, I will do that afterwards. It doesn't work like that. If I can say something to this, it's not really, they are actually tools. And I saw a question earlier as well on asking in regards to Intune and Workspace ONE. And something that I can say exactly to this Azure Image Builder possibility, and this is something unique that VMware and Microsoft are working on together to bring, it's something called Freestyle Orchestrator for Workspace ONE UEM. And this is a possibility where you exactly can track graphically inside the applications, the optimizations, like Marcel mentioned earlier. You can track scripts and all the applications that you want to have something like a pipeline in place with a graphical way of doing this. And this is one of our latest features as well from the suite that we can deliver also for the use case of AVD, then to build the images, to build out the virtual machines like your user want to consume it. And this just as an idea for a graphical way of solving the issue.
Cool.
Absolutely. Yeah. Marcel, any other on this?
Oh, I could only repeat what Patrick said. Yeah, the easiest way I know, and that is the reason why I built this tool, the WD admin tool 2 years ago, is to grab the image with 2 clicks. You right-click the virtual machine and say create image, and then on OK, and it will create an image. And the huge difference between doing that natively in Azure is that and that is strange, that your gold master, your original virtual machine, which you have prepared with all the application and hot fixes and so on, did survive. It will not, like in the Azure portal, if you do it natively and run sysprep on this virtual machine, it will not crash or destroy the virtual machine. WD admin makes a copy and will do all the parts which are destroying the virtual machine after the imaging process with the copy. So your original golden master will survive. It's totally simple. And that is, yeah, that was the first feature I built in because that was so helpful in projects.
Oh yeah, I can remember it. Yes, thanks. And Andrew also got the point and really also recommend to use and the automation tips are really helpful and helps to manage the whole AVD environment. So we have another question because getting more to the security stack and one moment, I have to take a look. Yes, what did you do to harden the AVD environment, Patrick?
Oh, that's a very good question. Hardening depends also again on your use cases that you run. That means you have multiple possibilities to consume hardening policies that are publicly available from the internet. For example, like in banking environments, there are certain companies that provide you with group policies, but they are really hard to maintain. That's for example something that you recommend. Microsoft in general provides also group policy sets for the security hardening, the security baselines that you can apply. But a very easy way of introducing those is also via the Intune console, for example. There is already a pack available for that for AVD that you can easily enable by a few clicks. But again, this is the same example like with the optimization tool. Do you really need all those optimizations or security hardenings? Because you always have to think of security versus user experience. If you want to make your users productive, you cannot shrink them in their whole kind of working. So you need to experience that a little bit for yourself. But if you want to go for an easy way without group policies, you should definitely consider going to Intune using the policies that are available for Azure Virtual Desktop in there.
Mm-hmm.
That would be my tip on this.
Absolutely great. Marcel.
Yeah, don't forget the network. That is even a big point where you can start securing your environment. And what a classic approach is to separate networks, for example, having an AVD subnet, which you can then which you can then protect the other subnets from the AVD users, because that are users sitting maybe in your data center, in your virtual data center, and you can then use NSG or firewalls to only allow the outgoing ports. Outgoing ports is wrong. To only allow the targets which are needed by the application from the SQL Server file system or so. I think that is an important point, because users are now sitting in your environment, and then you have to separate it from the networking point. And don't never do the or if you are, and I know a lot of companies are using proxies and proxy phalanx or having proxies on premises. It is an option to force that the network traffic for internet, for websites, goes through the proxy in the best way, having a proxy in Azure. It's also an option, or I often see that it's not the best way to use a proxy in the data center, so that the network traffic goes over the VPN express route to the proxies and then into the internet. If you're doing that, always make sure that you are not forcing the RDP traffic, the AVD traffic, the screen through a proxy to your data center. That will slow everything down. Make sure that is can be done with a direct outbreak in your Azure subscription, in the virtual network in Azure.
Perfect. I have also a great question seen because of using the Generation 1 and Generation 2 VMs in Azure. So what is your recommendation on this topic, Marcel?
Yeah, you can handle it like you want, because rolling out new session hosts with V1, V2 is pretty easy to do. There is one point where it is mandatory to use V2 virtual machine. I guess that is for Windows 11. And if you're later using features like secure boot, then it is mandatory to use v2 VM. There are some there could be some limitation if you're using a specific virtual machine type with v1 or v2. Not in any case any disk type, I guess, is available with a v2 virtual machine. But I have no preferences. If I roll out Windows 11, which I do more and more, I use v2 for sure.
Okay, Patrick?
Can just
Okay.
agree on what Marcel already said. It would have been exactly the same answer.
Perfect. So I see the time is running fast. So final call for the last question. So feel free to ask the latest question in the chat. And we coming to also a good question about it's a more FS Logic question, because I've seen one moment, I have to check where is the question gone. Yes. Can I use a cloud-only account with my FS Logic drive? Did you have any explanation on this, Patrick?
Wow, this is really an exciting question. When it comes to the new Azure AD only functionality, which is also a very great feature that Microsoft announced, is that you can use Azure files nowadays. This is possible, but the thing is still that it's in preview. You have to imagine that preview features aren't fully supported yet by Microsoft. So if you're having problems with that, you might not get the same support. From the time being, it works. I can confirm this, and it works. The thing is, it's not supported fully. And I wouldn't recommend it now for the production use, and still wait, but to test drive it, it's absolutely fine. But yeah, that's what I would recommend to you.
Perfect. Marcel?
Exactly the same what Patrick says.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so from my point, only a short question. Did you, and I know for old application is also needed, but did you really see a need in the future for the Active Directory environment, or did you think we can also go only with the Azure AD environment, also in the AVD environments? What is your explanation for the next 3 years in this case, Marcel?
Yeah, that is a kind of philosophical question.
Absolutely.
I like both, and I like having a native Active Directory, and that is often a reason why companies are using Azure Virtual Desktop or other virtualization technology, giving a desktop or a Windows application, because they are having old software, historical software, mostly specific software doing a specific task, which cannot be deployed so easily to a notebook. Or you have dependencies between the front-end application and the database or the data backend, which must be closed because of the performance. And that is often a reason, and that is often a trigger to do an AVD or to start an AVD project. So I guess that is still important because of the legacy, let me call it legacy apps. And I guess that will still be true for the next years. And on the other hand, I see more and more, but that is less than the other part, Azure AD native environment that are often special cases to provide a secure Windows application or desktop for users for some specific jobs, but no longer this legacy apps. That is not the reason. But I have seen that, and even with Cloud PC, I also see that is interesting for some special or for some use cases or business cases for companies.
Thanks, Patrick. What did you think?
Absolutely exciting question, and like Marcel already said, it's a little bit philosophic because I think that you can't get rid of your on-prem AD servers or domain controllers in the next couple of years. But one thing is sure, when we see the current adoption of Microsoft, also when it comes to the CAs, to all the new capabilities that are coming next for Azure AD, that the closer future will still be some kind of a hybrid model, but we can expect, and this is what I think is Microsoft's roadmap as well, and my personal preference, to go cloud native in the next 10 years probably. I think we are forced to do, the companies are adopting at the moment, at the time being, and so will applications. And legacy applications might still run. There will always be a capability of having on-prem domain controllers that must be given also to certain countries that are a bit slower in the adoption. But I see how can I say, the future definitely cloud only, cloud native, but maybe not
Thanks.
for 3 years.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I can absolutely agree to this. So I see this also in this space that is going more and more to the cloud. But yeah, we have in actually the on-prem and the legacy application for this is also the AVD a good solution. But yeah, I will looking forward what is coming next. So in this case, I will close the chat, the ask, as the questionnaire, but I will going to a point more privately to Patrick and Marcel. But firstly, Patrick, please say, I see you have a blog, your regular blog about different topics. So please explain some of the latest articles that you have wrote. And please give us some hints about the AVD Tech Fest. So I have here it is postponed. Please give some words on this when you like.
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Gregor, for the introduction. Yeah, to all of those that know that we have done the AVD Tech Fest in the past, that was actually a very successful online event. We, by that I mean Simon Binder and myself, we have planned to do it in person for the first time ever in April, which was actually in about 1 month to go. But due to the actual crisis that we have still with COVID, due to the war that is happening in the Ukraine, which is very hard for us as well to see because we have many friends over there hearing the stories, what's going on. This is just terrifying. We were forced basically to postpone the event to early September. We have actually planned to do this in the very first week of September, but more news will be announced. For us, it's the most important thing that all of our community members have the capability and the possibility to learn and come together. AVD TechFest is not an event where we want to bring how can I say, special persons together that who pays the most can attend the most. No, we want to make it as diverse and inclusive as possible. But for us, the safety of our speakers, of our attendees, and every viewer, might it be online or might it be in person, is our highest value and our aim that we have with the AVD Tech Fest. And for that reason, we decided together with our sponsors to postpone it for your safety. And for us, it's very, very important to establish that community feeling, which is not conflicting with any kind of health issue or any kind of political issue that is currently ongoing. For us, I can only say thank you to the community, really. Thank you to everybody that attended the AVD Tech Fest, and also Marcel and Gregor, who have been playing a major part of the AVD Tech Fest as speakers. For us, it's really something we do from the heart, something for the community. There's no intention of making money. And for that reason, we decided to postpone to September with the good news it will be for free to attend for everyone. So we will stream live in the internet, so you don't necessarily need to be in Amsterdam or anywhere in the world. For us, safety and health is the most important value nowadays. And we want to make sure to really give you the best experience that you can have. And it's not only a marketing speech now, this is really coming from the heart because we're investing so much time in this. And for us, that's the most pleasure that we have, to see you all happy and saying this was a valuable day for us. That's the only aim we have.
Thanks, Patrick. And yeah, we're really looking forward. And I also know that it's really hard to postpone it, but it's really hard also to plan. And so thank you for this point. And yeah, I know. And this address of your blog is also really the right one.
Exactly.
Okay.
The name changed with the naming of AVD.
We will take a look on this topic, and I will also share when they are coming a new announcement on the AVD Tech Fest. But yeah, I really got your point, and thank you for the clarifying in this. And yeah, so thank you. But in general, lastly, and Marcel, please introduce or give us some points where we can find you, and what is your next feature on Hydra or VVD admin.
Yeah, the newest feature was yesterday or 2 days ago, the dark mode in WVD admin.
Oh yeah,
But
I've seen it.
but my newest blog post that is also, I guess, from yesterday or 2 days ago, that is, it comes from my second favorite service in Azure, that is Azure Log Analytics, Azure Monitor. I built a workbook which you can roll out and having it in a log analytic workspace where you can see a lot of AVD related data, and you can use it to see the errors happening in AVD, and then you can drill down by time, by user into each single event to figure out where are issues coming from. And the last update I made was to also show, I forget it. No. The second was to show the latencies and the bandwidth in the workbook of the AVD connections by username, and that is the important part. And the update 2 days ago, give me a hint, Gregor. What have I written? And the thing that was absolutely new, and I got this information from a colleague of Microsoft. Give me a second. It's auto appended. That is to have also in the workbook the Windows logon timing. Yeah, how long does it take for the group policy, attaching Avis Logic's profile, and so on by username. And you can also drill down into the single session to see how long a specific session took to log on. Yeah, thanks.
So, thanks. Yeah, and I have posted the two blog and links on the chat. So please feel free to go to Marcel and to Patrick's blog. Is really helpful and really a pleasure to see how many efforts they're doing in the whole community stuff and many community projects around AVD. And from my point, I will close the chat and the Azure AMA session for today. And I will really say a big thank you to you both, Marcel and Patrick, that you are joining me today live on this additional AMA session. And I'm really sure that we will see us together in this year, maybe related on summer. But it's really a pleasure for me. So thank you. And I wish you really a great weekend. So for the attendees, please feel free to share your recommendations, your feedback also on this space in the chat. When you have additional ideas for the next Azure AMA session, feel free to reach us, and especially feel free to reach Patrick and Marcel. They are really great community guys for the AVD environment. It's really a pleasure to work with him. So thank you and goodbye.
Thank you, Gregor.
Thank you, Gregor.